Maya Rodriguez had always believed that her greatest challenge would be saving her family's ranch from bankruptcy. At 30 years old, she possessed the kind of practical intelligence that comes from growing up on 800 acres of unforgiving Montana rangeland. Combined with the theoretical knowledge earned through a master's degree in agricultural science from Montana State University, she understood soil composition, cattle genetics, market fluctuations, and sustainable grazing practices. What she never expected to understand was how to rewrite human history. The Estrella Ranch sprawled across a remote valley in the Beartooth Mountains of southern Montana, accessible only by a single gravel road that became impassable during the brutal winter storms that defined life in this corner of Big Sky country. Maya's nearest neighbor, Jim Weatherby, live 12 miles away, across terrain so rough that even in good weather, the drive took 45 minutes of careful navigation around washouts, fallen trees, and stream crossings that could turn deadly. During spring runoff, this isolation, which had once been the ranch's greatest asset during her grandfather's era, had become its greatest liability in the connected world of modern agriculture. Cell service reached the ranch sporadically. Internet was virtually non-existent. And when equipment broke down, which it did with increasing frequency, during his first decade on the land, he gradually expanded his holdings, purchasing adjacent parcels from ranchers who were selling out to pursue easier opportunities in town. By 1970, the Estrella Ranch encompassed 800 acres of deeded land plus grazing rights on an additional 2,000 acres of national forest. Maya's grandmother, Rosa, had inherited both the ranch and Carlos's formidable work ethic when her father died in 1975. She expanded the operation during the agricultural boom of the 1980s, introducing new breeding programs that produced cattle specifically adapted to Montana's harsh climate and challenging terrain. Rosa pioneered rotational grazing techniques that improved both soil health and beef quality, making Estrella Ranch beef a premium product sought after by restaurants and specialty markets throughout the region. Under Rosa's management, the ranch became known not just for its quality cattle, but for its innovative approaches to sustainable ranching. She established windbreaks that prevented soil erosion, developed water retention systems that captured and stored precipitation, and created habitat corridors that supported wildlife while maintaining productive rangeland. Rosa's innovations were featured in agricultural journals, and she was invited to speak at ranching conferences across the western United States. The annual Estrella Ranch Summer Gathering became a highlight of the local ranching calendar, drawing visitors from 3 states to witness Rosa's demonstration of low-stress cattle handling techniques, taste her famous green chili beef barbacoa, and participate in discussions about the future of family ranching in an increasingly corporate-dominated industry. Maya had grown up immersed in this legacy of innovation and excellence. As a child, she spent summers working alongside Rosa, learning to read weather patterns, understand cattle behavior, and appreciate the intricate relationships between soil, grass, water, and livestock that define successful ranching. Maya's academic pursuits at Montana State had been specifically chosen to build upon this foundation. Soil science, animal nutrition, range management, and agricultural economics, with the goal of bringing cutting-edge scientific knowledge to bear on the challenges facing family ranches in the 21st century. When Rosa passed away 2 years ago at the age of 78, Maya inherited not just the ranch, but also detailed journals documenting 6 decades of careful observation, experimentation, and accumulated wisdom about working this specific piece of land. Rosa's final entry spoke repeatedly about the ranch's special qualities and her hope that Maya would discover what makes this place different from anywhere else. At the time, Maya had interpreted these comments as her grandmother's poetic way of expressing her deep connection to the land. Now, standing at the edge of an impossible discovery, Maya wondered if Rosa had known something more specific about the property's unique characteristics. Maya's return to the ranch in 2022 had been accompanied by ambitious plans for modernization and expansion. She'd envisioned implementing precision agriculture techniques, establishing direct-to-consumer marketing channels, and developing agritourism programs that would showcase sustainable ranching practices while generating additional revenue streams. Her master's thesis had focused on regenerative grazing systems that could restore degraded rangeland while maintaining profitable cattle operations. But the reality of ranching in 2024 had proved far more challenging than Maya's academic preparation had anticipated. The cattle market had experienced unprecedented volatility, with prices swinging wildly based on factors beyond any individual rancher's control. Trade disputes, environmental regulations, consumer preference shifts, and supply chain disruptions that rippled through the entire agricultural sector. The problems had begun almost immediately after Maya's return. A late spring blizzard in 2022 had killed 37 calves and required expensive emergency feeding that exhausted the ranch's cash reserves. Equipment failures had plagued the operation throughout that first year, with repair costs exceeding Maya's entire maintenance budget by August. The ranch's ancient Ford pickup truck had required a complete transmission rebuild. The hay baler needed new bearings and belts, and the water pump system that supplied the eastern pastures had failed. During the hottest part of summer, requiring emergency replacement at a cost of $12,000. More devastating than equipment problems was the discovery that Rosa's final years had been marked by mounting medical expenses that she'd hidden from Maya. To avoid burdening her granddaughter during her graduate studies, cancer treatments, prescription, medications not covered by Medicare, and specialized care had required Rosa to take out loans against the ranch's equity. When Maya inherited the property, she also inherited $127,000 in debt that Rosa had secured against the land itself. The 2023 season had brought different challenges, but no relief from financial pressure. A drought that lasted from June through September had forced Maya to purchase supplemental feed at inflated prices while watching her pastures turn brown, and her water sources dwindled to levels that threatened both cattle and wildlife. When autumn rains finally arrived, they came too late to restore the rangeland, but just in time to complicate the harvest of the limited hay crop Maya had managed to produce. Corporate consolidation in the cattle industry had eliminated many of the local buyers that Rosa had relied upon for decades. Mega ranches operated by agricultural conglomerates could negotiate contracts that guaranteed premium prices for their cattle, while family operations like Maya's were forced to accept whatever prices were offered at regional livestock auctions. The difference between wholesale and premium prices had grown to the point where Maya earned 30% less per head than operations just 50 miles away that had the volume to justify direct corporate contracts. Feed costs had tripled since Rosa's time, driven by crop failures in other regions, increased transportation expenses, and speculative trading in agricultural commodities. Veterinary care, essential for maintaining cattle health and meeting federal inspection requirements, had become so expensive that Maya had learned to perform many routine procedures herself, purchasing supplies online and watching YouTube videos to master techniques that previous generations had left to professionals. Perhaps most frustratingly, the sustainable ranching practices that Maya had studied and Rosa had pioneered were now required by various certification programs and environmental regulations, but without compensation for the additional costs and complexity they imposed. Maya spent hours each week on paperwork, documentation, and compliance reporting that generated no revenue while consuming time she desperately needed for actual ranch work. The foreclosure notice from First Mountain Bank had arrived on a Tuesday morning in early September, delivered by a courier who'd driven all the way from Billings to serve the papers personally. Maya had known it was coming. She'd missed too. Mortgage payments had fallen behind on property taxes, but seeing the legal documents had still felt like a physical blow. According to the bank's calculations, the Estrella Ranch owed $186,000 in accumulated debt, including the original loans Rosa had taken, accrued interest, penalty fees, and property taxes. Maya had until October 31st, exactly 7 weeks from the notice date, to either pay the full amount or lose the land her family had worked for 3 generations. Maya had immediately begun exploring options. She'd contacted agricultural lenders in Billings, Denver, and Salt Lake City, hoping to refinance the debt at better terms. But the ranch's remote location, declining cattle market, and Maya's limited credit history made lenders reluctant to extend new credit. The few offers she received came with interest rates and terms that would only accelerate the ranch's financial collapse. Selling cattle could generate immediate cash, but Maya had already reduced her herd to the minimum needed to maintain breeding stock for future years. Selling more animals would eliminate the ranch's ability to generate income, making the debt problem even worse. Leasing grazing rights to other ranchers might help with cash flow, but the amounts involved were too small to significantly impact the debt load. The most serious offer had come from Titan Development Group, a Colorado-based company that specialized in converting working ranches into luxury vacation properties for wealthy urbanites seeking authentic Western experiences. Titan's representative, a smooth-talking man named Bradley Morrison, had spent 3 hours walking the property with Maya, pointing out features that would appeal to city dwellers wanting to play cowboy for a long weekend. Morrison's proposal involved purchasing the ranch for $2.3 million, paying off all debts, and giving Maya a $400,000 check to relocate. The property would be subdivided into 12 luxury cabin sites, each with access to guided trail rides, gourmet chuck wagon dinners, and supervised cattle driving experiences using a small herd maintained specifically for tourist entertainment. You'd be free to pursue opportunities anywhere you wanted, Morrison had explained as they stood on the ridge overlooking the main valley. No more worrying about cattle markets, equipment failures, or weather. You could travel, start a new career, maybe find a nice place in town where you wouldn't be so isolated. Maya had requested time to consider the offer, but she knew what her grandmother and great-grandfather would have thought about converting their life's work into a playground for rich tourists. The very isolation that made modern ranching so challenging was part of what made this land special, the silence broken only by wind and wildlife, the night skies unpolluted by artificial light, the sense of being connected to something larger and more enduring than urban convenience. The September storm that ultimately revealed Maya's life-changing discovery had been unprecedented in its violence and unpredictability. Weather forecasters had predicted a typical autumn cold front train, wind, and possibly some early snow. At higher elevations, what arrived instead was a system with hurricane-force winds, softball-sized hail, the kind of temperature variations that wreaked havoc on everything from livestock to infrastructure. Maya had spent the night before the storm, moving her remaining 43 head of cattle to the sheltered valley bottom, securing equipment that could be blown around, and checking the generator system that would keep essential services running if the power lines went down. She'd been through dozens of storms during her years growing up on the ranch, but something about this system felt different, more intense, more chaotic, more dangerous than the typical weather patterns she'd learned to read and respect. Storms struck at 3 a.m. with winds that Maya later learned had reached sustained speeds of 97 miles per hour, officially qualifying as a Category 2 hurricane despite occurring over 1,000 miles from any ocean. The sound was unlike anything she'd experienced, not the familiar howling of prairie winds, but a constant roar that seemed to come from all directions at once, punctuated by the crack of trees snapping and the metallic screaming of structures being torn apart. Maya's ranch house, built by Carlos in 1961 and reinforced by Rosa during the 1990s, weathered the wind without serious damage, but the outbuildings suffered extensive destruction. The hay barn lost most of its roof, scattering bales across 3 pastures and destroying feed that Maya couldn't afford to replace. The equipment shed's walls buckled, crushing Rosé's vintage Ford tractor and damaging implements that dated back decades. Most seriously affected was the ranch's eastern boundary, where a quarter-mile section of fence line ran through timber that had stood for over a century. Hurricane-force winds toppled dozens of massive ponderosa pines and Douglas firs, some with trunk diameters exceeding 4 feet. The falling trees didn't just destroy the fence, they created a tangled obstacle course of timber, wire, and posts that would require weeks of dangerous, expensive work to clear. When Maya surveyed the damage the next morning, her first thought was that the storm had delivered the final blow to her hopes of saving the ranch. The cost of replacing the hay, repairing the buildings, and clearing the fallen timber would exceed any resources she could possibly access. Insurance might cover some of the structural damage, But with a $5,000 deductible and policy limits that hadn't been updated since Rose's time, Maya knew she'd be responsible for most of the costs. Maya began the fence repair work. 3 days after the storm, starting with the sections that would be easiest to clear and working methodically toward the more challenging areas where massive trees had created complex tangles of debris. She'd rented a small bulldozer from a equipment dealer in Red Lodge, trading ranch work for the operator who would help her move the larger logs. The work was backbreaking and dangerous. Many of the fallen trees remained under tension, held up by neighboring trees or caught in positions where they could shift suddenly and catastrophically. Maya and her helper, Jake Morrison, no relation to the developer, had to carefully analyze each situation, determining the safest approach to cutting and moving timber without being crushed by unpredictable movements. It was while clearing a massive Douglas fir that had fallen across the fence line near a limestone outcropping that Maya made her discovery. The tree's root ball had been enormous, nearly 12 feet in diameter when the wind finally overcame its grip on the rocky soil. When it toppled, the roots had pulled up not just earth and stone, but what appeared to be a carefully fitted stone cover that had been hidden beneath centuries of accumulated soil and vegetation. Maya's first assumption was that she'd uncovered an old well or root cellar knot, uncommon features on ranch properties that had been worked for decades. Previous owners might have built underground storage for food, tools, or supplies, then forgotten about or deliberately concealed such structures. But as she cleared away loose soil and examined the stone cover more carefully, several details suggested something more unusual. The cover was made from a single piece of limestone that had been shaped with remarkable precision. Its edges fit perfectly into a circular opening carved directly into the bedrock, with tolerances so tight that Maya couldn't insert even a knife blade between the cover and the surrounding stone. The surface had been polished smooth and inscribed with symbols that didn't match any historical or cultural traditions Maya recognized from her studies. Using a crowbar and the bulldozer's hydraulic assistance, Maya carefully lifted the stone cover, revealing a circular opening approximately 4 feet in diameter. Her flashlight illuminated carved stone steps descending into darkness, with walls that showed the same precise stonework and mysterious symbols she'd noticed on the cover. The air rising from the opening carried a strange, almost metallic scent that seemed to make Maya's skin tingle. Despite her practical nature and scientific training, she felt an immediate and powerful urge to explore whatever lay below her, compulsion that overrode her normal caution about confined spaces and unknown hazards. Maya's exploration of the hidden chamber began with careful preparation. She'd learned enough about confined space safety during her agricultural studies to know that underground spaces could contain dangerous gases, unstable structures, or other hazards that could prove fatal to unprepared explorers. She tested the air quality using a digital meter, checked for obvious structural problems, and established a safety protocol that included regular communication with Jake, who remained on the surface with instructions to call for help if Maya didn't return within 2 hours. The carved stone steps descended approximately 15 feet through solid limestone, following a spiral path that had been cut with the same precision Maya had observed in the cover and opening. The walls were smooth and slightly warm to the touch, with the mysterious symbols appearing at regular intervals along the descent. Maya photographed each symbol with her phone, though the images couldn't capture the subtle three-dimensional quality that made the carving seem almost alive in her flashlight beam. At the bottom of the stairs, Maya found herself in a circular chamber approximately 20 feet in diameter, with a domed ceiling that rose to a height of 12 feet at its center. But it was the walls that stopped her breath and challenged everything she thought she knew about human history and capability. Every surface was covered with detailed paintings in colors so vivid they seemed to glow in her flashlight beam. The pigments ranged from deep earth tones, ochres, umbers, and siennas, to brilliant blues, greens, and reds that appeared to contain metallic elements that reflected light in unusual ways. The preservation was perfect, as if the paintings had been completed yesterday rather than millennia ago. But it was the content of the artwork that truly challenged Maya's understanding of what should be possible. These weren't the simple stick figures, handprints, or basic animal depictions she'd seen in photographs of other prehistoric art sites. Instead, she found herself looking at sophisticated, detailed representations that demonstrated knowledge of anatomy, astronomy, mathematics, and engineering principles that weren't supposed to exist in prehistoric American cultures. Maya spent her first hour in the chamber, simply trying to absorb the scope and implications of what she was seeing. The paintings were organized into distinct thematic sections, each telling a specific part of what appeared to be a larger, interconnected narrative about human development and interaction with beings that didn't appear in any fossil record or historical account. One section depicted human figures with anatomical precision that suggested detailed knowledge of internal body structures. The artists had somehow known about organ placement, bone structure, and muscle systems that wouldn't be documented by conventional medicine for thousands of years. Some figures were shown in cross-section, revealing circulatory and nervous systems, rendered with accuracy that modern medical students would recognize. Another section focused on astronomical knowledge that challenged Maya's understanding of prehistoric capabilities. Star charts covered portions of the ceiling with mathematical accuracy that shouldn't have been possible for people without sophisticated instruments. The paintings showed planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions with precision that suggested not just observation, but calculation and prediction of celestial mechanics. Most disturbing and fascinating were the recurring images of tall, elongated figures with large craniums who appeared to be teaching or demonstrating various technologies to groups of normal-proportioned humans. These beings were consistently portrayed with specific physical characteristics, heights averaging 7 to 8 feet, limb proportions that differed significantly from human anatomy, and cranial structures that suggested brain capacities far exceeding normal human ranges. Maya counted at least 17 different scenes showing these mysterious teachers sharing knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, and what appeared to be engineering principles far in advance of anything found in conventional archaeological sites from the Americas. The human students were shown using tools that resembled modern scientific instruments, working with mathematical concepts represented by symbol systems that suggested advanced theoretical knowledge, and engaging in construction projects that required understanding of physics and materials science. As Maya continued her examination of the chamber, she identified specific technologies and knowledge systems that contradicted everything she'd learned about prehistoric human capabilities. One series of paintings showed humans using what appeared to be telescopes or other optical instruments to observe celestial bodies. The detail was sufficient to suggest that these weren't simple viewing tubes, but sophisticated devices with multiple lenses or mirrors that could magnify distant objects. Another section depicted what could only be interpreted as written language, not the simple pictographs or basic symbol systems found at other prehistoric sites, but complex arrangements of characters that suggested grammar, syntax, and abstract concept representation. The writing appeared in multiple forms throughout the chamber, sometimes integrated with the paintings, sometimes standing alone as if documenting specific information or procedures. Perhaps most challenging to conventional understanding were the depictions of construction and engineering projects that required knowledge of advanced mathematics and physics. Maya identified images that appeared to show humans building structures using principles of leverage, counterbalance, and load distribution that shouldn't have been understood for thousands of years. The tools depicted in these construction scenes resembled modern engineering instruments more than the simple stone and bone implements typically associated with prehistoric cultures. Water management systems shown in several paintings suggested understanding of hydraulics, fluid dynamics, and civil engineering that rivaled modern capabilities. The artists had depicted not just basic irrigation, but complex networks of canals, reservoirs, and distribution systems that required sophisticated planning and mathematical calculation. What captivated and disturbed Maya most were the detailed interactions between the elongated beings and their human students. These weren't simple scenes of worship or submission, but what appeared to be genuine educational relationships, where knowledge was being systematically transferred from teachers to students through demonstration, practice, and guided discovery. The elongated beings were consistently shown with patient instructional postures, guiding human hands as they learn to use new tools, pointing to specific features of astronomical charts and demonstrating mathematical concepts using manipulatable objects and symbols. The humans appeared engaged and capable, suggesting that this wasn't a case of advanced beings imposing knowledge on primitive recipients, but rather a collaborative process where human intelligence was being developed and enhanced through expert guidance. One particularly striking sequence showed the progression of human capabilities over what appeared to be multiple generations. Early panels depicted humans with basic hunter-gatherer technologies and social organizations. Subsequent panels showed the arrival of the elongated teachers and the beginning of systematic instruction. Later panels revealed humans who had mastered the taught technologies and were beginning to develop innovations of their own, building upon the foundation provided by their mysterious instructors. The final panels in this sequence showed humans who appeared to have fully integrated the advanced knowledge, working independently on projects that rivaled their teachers' capabilities. But these panels also included symbols and imagery that suggested the teachers were preparing to depart, leaving their students to continue developing independently. As someone with scientific training, Maya immediately recognized several impossibilities about the artwork itself, beyond its challenging content. The pigments should have faded, flaked, or degraded after exposure to air, moisture, and temperature variations over thousands of years. Instead, they appeared as fresh and vibrant as if they'd been applied recently. The artistic techniques demonstrated perspective, shading, proportion, color theory that weren't supposed to exist in prehistoric art. The painters had understood how to create three-dimensional effects on two-dimensional surfaces. 2. Use color, temperature, and intensity to suggest distance and depth, and how to manipulate visual perception to create images that seem to move or change when viewed from different angles. Most mysteriously, certain sections of the artwork seemed to possess a subtle luminescence that didn't depend on external light sources. When Maya turned off her flashlight to test this observation, some of the pigments continued to emit a faint glow that allowed her to see the paintings in complete darkness. This bioluminescence, or phosphorescence, suggested either mineral components unknown to modern science, or painting techniques that incorporated some form of energy storage and release. Maya spent over 4 hours documenting the chamber, taking hundreds of photographs and video recordings that she knew couldn't fully capture the three-dimensional quality and subtle luminescence of the original artwork. As she worked, she became increasingly aware that she was documenting something that would force archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians to completely reconsider their understanding of human development in North America. But even as excitement built about her discovery, practical concerns gnawed at Maya's consciousness. What would happen to her ranch once word of this find got out? Would the government claim the land for archaeological study? Would she lose not just to the bank but to federal seizure for historical preservation? And perhaps most troubling, why did some of the symbols and imagery in the chamber seem strangely familiar? As if she'd seen them somewhere before but couldn't quite remember where. As Maya finally climbed back to the surface, her mind racing, with implications and questions, she had no idea that her discovery would soon attract attention from people who had been waiting decades for this moment. People who knew far more about the chamber's contents than any conventional archaeologists, knew had very specific plans for what should happen next. Maya emerged from the chamber as the sun was setting, her mind reeling with the implications of what she'd discovered. Jake Morrison had waited patiently on the surface, occasionally calling down to check on her progress. But nothing in his experience as a ranch hand and equipment operator had prepared him for Maya's description of what lay beneath the limestone outcropping. "You're telling me there's some kind of underground art gallery down there?" Jake asked, his weathered face creased with skepticism. "With paintings that show people who ain't supposed to exist?" Maya nodded, scrolling through the hundreds of photographs on her phone. Even in the small screen's limited resolution, the images were extraordinary detailed depictions of advanced technologies, astronomical charts with mathematical precision, and the recurring presence of the elongated beings who appeared to be teaching groups of normal proportioned humans. "Jake, I need you to promise me something," Maya said, her voice serious. Don't mention this to anyone until I figure out what to do. If word gets out before I understand the implications, I could lose the ranch to government seizure before I have any chance to fight the foreclosure. Jake studied Maya's face, recognizing the same determination he'd seen in her grandmother Rosa when she'd faced difficult decisions about the ranch's future. You got it, Maya, but you're going to need help figuring this out. This is way beyond anything either of us knows about. Maya spent the next 3 days researching archaeologists, anthropologists, and other experts who might be able to help her understand what she'd found. She needed someone with legitimate credentials who could validate the discovery's significance, but also someone she could trust to respect her rights as the landowner and not immediately contact government agencies that might seize the property. Her search letter to Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a professor of North American archaeology at the University of Montana, who had built her reputation studying prehistoric cultures of the northern Rocky Mountains. Dr. Walsh's published papers showed both rigorous scientific methodology and a healthy skepticism toward conventional archaeological timelines that might make her more open to evidence that challenged established theories. More importantly, Dr. Walsh had a track record of working collaboratively with private landowners, ensuring that archaeological discoveries didn't automatically result in property seizures or loss of owner rights. She'd helped establish protocols that allowed for scientific study while respecting landowner interests, exactly the kind of balanced approach Maya needed. Maya's initial phone call to Dr. Walsh was carefully planned to gauge the archaeologist's interest without revealing too many details that might prompt immediate action. She described finding unusual rock art during storm cleanup and asked if Dr. Walsh might be willing to examine the site privately before any official reports were made. Dr. Walsh's response was immediately encouraging. Ms. Rodriguez, I appreciate landowners who contact researchers directly rather than going through government channels first. Too many significant discoveries get buried in bureaucratic processes that serve no one's interests, not the landowners, not science's, and certainly not the public's. They arranged for Dr. Walsh to visit the ranch the following weekend, giving Maya time to prepare for what she hoped would be a productive collaboration. Maya spent those days reviewing her photographs, organizing her documentation, and researching Dr. Walsh's background to better understand how to present the discovery in ways that would maximize its scientific impact while protecting her interests. Dr. Walsh arrived, but even as excitement built about her discovery, practical concerns gnawed at Maya's consciousness. What would happen to her ranch once word of this find got out? Would the government claim the land for archaeological study? Would she lose not just to the bank but to federal seizure for historical preservation? And perhaps most troubling, why did some of the symbols and imagery in the chamber seem strangely familiar? As if she'd seen them somewhere before but couldn't quite remember where. As Maya finally climbed back to the surface, her mind racing with implications and questions, she had no idea that her discovery would soon attract attention from people who had been waiting decades for this moment. People who knew far more about the chamber's contents than any conventional archaeologists, had very specific plans for what should happen next. Maya emerged from the chamber as the sun was setting, her mind reeling with the implications of what she'd discovered. Jake Morrison had waited patiently on the surface, occasionally calling down to check on her progress. But nothing in his experience as a ranch hand and equipment operator had prepared him for Maya's description of what lay beneath the limestone outcropping. You're telling me there's some kind of underground art gallery down there? Jake asked, his weathered face creased with skepticism. With paintings that show people who ain't supposed to exist? Maya nodded, scrolling through the hundreds of photographs on her phone. Even in the small screen's limited resolution, the images were extraordinary detailed depictions of advanced technologies, astronomical charts with mathematical precision, and the recurring presence of the elongated beings who appeared to be teaching groups of normal-proportioned humans. Jake, I need you to promise me something, Maya said, her voice serious. Don't mention this to anyone until I figure out what to do. If word gets out before I understand the implications, I could lose the ranch to government seizure before I have any chance to fight the foreclosure. Jake studied Maya's face, recognizing the same determination he'd seen in her grandmother Rosa when she'd faced difficult decisions about the ranch's future. You got it, Maya, but you're going to need help figuring this out. This is way beyond anything either of us knows about." Maya spent the next 3 days researching archaeologists, anthropologists, and other experts who might be able to help her understand what she'd found. She needed someone with legitimate credentials who could validate the discovery's significance, but also someone she could trust to respect her rights as the landowner, and not immediately contact government agencies that might seize the property. Her search letter to Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a professor of North American archaeology at the University of Montana, who had built her reputation studying prehistoric cultures of the northern Rocky Mountains. Dr. Walsh's published papers showed both rigorous scientific methodology and a healthy skepticism toward conventional archaeological timelines that might make her more open to evidence that challenged established theories. More importantly, Dr. Walsh had a track record of working collaboratively with private landowners, ensuring that archaeological discoveries didn't automatically result in property seizures or loss of owner rights. She'd helped establish protocols that allowed for scientific study while respecting landowner interests, exactly the kind of balanced approach Maya needed. Maya's initial phone call to Dr. Walsh was carefully planned to gauge the archaeologist's interest without revealing too many details that might prompt immediate action. She described finding unusual rock art during storm cleanup and asked if Dr. Walsh might be willing to examine the site privately before any official reports were made. Dr. Walsh's response was immediately encouraging. "Ms. Rodriguez, I appreciate landowners who contact researchers directly rather than going through government channels first. Too many significant discoveries get buried in bureaucratic processes that serve no one's interests, not the landowners, not science's, and certainly not the public's." They arranged for Dr. Walsh to visit the ranch the following weekend, giving Maya time to prepare for what she hoped would be a productive collaboration. Maya spent those days reviewing her photographs, organizing her documentation, and researching Dr. Walsh's background to better understand how to present the discovery in ways that would maximize its scientific impact while protecting her interests. Dr. Walsh arrived at the Estrella Ranch on Saturday morning, driving a dust-covered Toyota 4Runner loaded with archaeological equipment, cameras, and measurement tools. She was younger than Maya had expected, perhaps 45 years old, with graying auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of weathered complexion that spoke of years working in outdoor field conditions, I have to admit. They spent the next 2 hours discussing options, alternatives, and strategies that might allow Maya to maintain ownership while facilitating scientific research. Dr. Walsh's experience with landowner-researcher collaborations provided several models that had worked in other situations, though none had involved discoveries quite as significant as what lay beneath the Estrella Ranch. 3 days after Dr. Walsh's visit, Maya received a phone call that changed everything about her understanding of the situation. The caller identified himself as Dr. Marcus Chen, claiming to represent a specialized research division within the Department of the Interior that dealt with sensitive archaeological discoveries. "Ms. Rodriguez," Dr. Chen said, his voice carrying an authority that immediately put Maya on edge, "we understand you've made a significant discovery on your property. We'd like to arrange a meeting to discuss the implications and explore how we might work together on this matter." Maya's first reaction was confusion. She hadn't contacted any government agencies, and Dr. Walsh had assured her that she would wait for Maya's approval before making any official notifications. How had a federal agency learned about the chamber? "Not sure what you're referring to," Maya replied carefully. "I haven't reported any discoveries to government agencies." Dr. Chen's response was both reassuring and disturbing. "Ms. Rodriguez, we're not here in an enforcement capacity. Our division has been monitoring certain types of discoveries for decades, and we have protocols in place to ensure that significant finds receive appropriate attention while respecting landowner rights." The implication that government agencies had been monitoring archaeological discoveries suggested a level of surveillance and federal involvement that Maya hadn't anticipated. More troubling was Dr. Chen's obvious knowledge of her situation, despite her efforts to keep the discovery private. "How did you learn about my property?" Maya asked directly. "We have relationships with researchers throughout the academic community," Dr. Chen explained. "When discoveries of particular significance come to light, were often notified as part of standard professional protocols. Maya immediately suspected that Dr. Walsh had contacted federal agencies, despite her assurances about waiting for approval. The sense of betrayal was sharp. She'd trusted the archaeologist with information that could determine the ranch's future, and apparently that trust had been misplaced. Dr. Chen, I think there's been some misunderstanding. I haven't authorized any researcher to contact government agencies about my property. Ms. Rodriguez, I understand your concerns about federal involvement, and I want to assure you that our approach is collaborative rather than regulatory. We're not here to seize your property or override your rights. We'd simply like to discuss the situation and explore how we might work together for everyone's benefit. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Dr. Chen providing vague but sophisticated explanations about his division's role in managing sensitive archaeological situations. He demonstrated knowledge of archaeological terminology, federal preservation laws, and landowner rights that suggested legitimate expertise. But something about his approach felt coordinated in ways that made Maya increasingly uncomfortable. They arranged to meet the following afternoon at the ranch, giving Maya time to contact Dr. Walsh and demand an explanation for what appeared to be a breach of their agreement. Maya's call to Dr. Walsh that evening was tense and direct. Dr. Walsh, I just received a call from someone claiming to represent a federal research division who knows about my discovery. Did you contact government agencies despite our agreement? Dr. Walsh's response was immediate and genuinely surprised. Ms. Rodriguez, I absolutely did not contact any federal agencies. I've been working on analysis of my documentation, but I haven't shared information about your site with anyone outside my immediate research team. The archaeologist's denial seemed sincere, but it raised more troubling questions about how Dr. Chen had learned about the chamber. If Dr. Walsh hadn't made official notifications, how had federal agencies become aware of the discovery? Dr. Walsh, this Dr. Chen person knew specific details about my situation. He referenced sensitive archaeological discoveries and claimed his division monitors such finds. Does that sound familiar to you? There was a long pause before Dr. Walsh responded, and when she did, her voice carried a note of concern that hadn't been present before. Ms. Rodriguez, I've been working in archaeology for 20 years, and I've never heard of a specialized Interior Department division that monitors discoveries in the way this person described. That doesn't mean such a division doesn't exist, but it's not part of the normal federal response to archaeological finds. Dr. Walsh's uncertainty was more disturbing than outright confirmation would have been. It suggested that Dr. Chen's organization operated outside normal academic and governmental channels, exactly the kind of shadowy federal involvement that Maya had hoped to avoid. What should I do? Maya asked. This Dr. Chen wants to meet tomorrow afternoon. I think you should meet with him, but not alone, Dr. Walsh advised. I'd like to be present for this conversation. If there's a legitimate federal interest in your discovery, we need to understand what that means for both scientific research and your property rights. They arranged for Dr. Walsh to arrive at the ranch an hour before the scheduled meeting, giving her time to review the situation and prepare for what might be a complex negotiation involving scientific, legal, and property rights issues. Dr. Chen arrived at the Estrella Ranch in a black SUV with government plates, accompanied by two associates who introduced themselves as Dr. Sarah Kim, anthropological linguist, and Agent David Reeves, whose specific role wasn't clearly defined but who carried himself with the bearing of law enforcement or military personnel. Maya's first impression was that these weren't typical government bureaucrats. They moved with purpose and efficiency, carried sophisticated equipment, and demonstrated knowledge of the ranch's layout that suggested advanced preparation far beyond what would be normal for an initial contact meeting. Dr. Chen was perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and the kind of calm authority that suggested extensive experience in complex negotiations. Dr. Kim appeared younger, with the intense focus Maya recognized in serious academics, but also an alertness that seemed more suited to intelligence work than university research. Agent Reeves remained largely silent, but his constant scanning of the environment and obvious familiarity with security protocols suggested a background in protective services or covert operations. Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Walsh, Dr. Chen began. Settling into the chair Maya had arranged on her front porch, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I want to begin by assuring you that our interest in your discovery is scientific rather than regulatory. We're here to facilitate research and protect important finds, not to create problems for landowners. Dr. Walsh immediately challenged this assertion. Dr. Chen, I've been unable to find any record of your research division in federal directories or academic databases. Could you clarify your agency's role and authority in archaeological matters? Dr. Chen's response was smooth but evasive. Dr. Walsh, our division operates under classifications that limit our public visibility, but our authority derives from federal legislation related to protecting sensitive archaeological and cultural resources. We work closely with academic researchers and private landowners to ensure that significant discoveries receive appropriate attention, while respecting all legitimate interests. Maya noticed that Dr. Chen hadn't directly answered Dr. Walsh's question about agency identification or specific legal authority. Instead, he'd provided vague references. Dr. Chen's next move eliminated any doubt about the extent of his organization's knowledge. He removed a tablet from his briefcase and began displaying photographs that showed the interior of Maya's chamber with detail and clarity that rivaled her own documentation. These images were captured using specialized remote sensing equipment. Dr. Chen explained as Maya and Dr. Walsh stared at the impassable photographs. We've been monitoring subsurface anomalies in this region for several years as part of a broader research initiative. Photographs showed not only the painted chamber Maya had discovered, but also adjacent spaces that she hadn't yet explored. The images revealed a complex of interconnected chambers, corridors, and structures that extended far beyond the single room she documented. There's more down there, Maya whispered, studying the photographs with growing amazement. Considerably more, Dr. Kim confirmed. The chamber you discovered is actually part of a larger complex that represents one of the most significant archaeological sites ever found in North America. The full extent includes at least 12 interconnected chambers, each containing different types of information and artifacts. Dr. Walsh leaned forward, her professional excitement overriding her concerns about the federal agent's mysterious authority. Are you saying there's an entire underground complex beneath Ms. Rodriguez's property? We're saying that what Ms. Rodriguez discovered is far more significant than even our preliminary assessments suggested, Dr. Chen replied. The site represents a complete repository of advanced knowledge that challenges our understanding of prehistoric human capabilities. Maya felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as the implications sank in. If the federal agents were correct about the site's scope, her discovery was indeed revolutionary. But a complex of 12 chambers would certainly attract attention. That would be impossible to control or contain. What does this mean for my ranch? Maya asked, voicing the concern that overrode all other considerations. Dr. Chen's response was carefully measured. Ms. Rodriguez, sites of this significance typically do require federal protection and oversight. However, our division has authority to negotiate arrangements that respect landowner rights while ensuring appropriate scientific access. What kind of arrangements? Dr. Walsh pressed. Agent Reeves consulted his own tablet before responding. Dr. Walsh, federal protocols for sensitive archaeological sites include options for cooperative agreements that allow private ownership to continue, while facilitating controlled research access. Such agreements often include compensation for landowner cooperation and guaranteed protection of property rights. The offer sounded reasonable. But Maya had learned enough about government operations to know that cooperative agreements could easily become mechanisms for federal control that respected landowner rights only as long as those rights didn't conflict with federal interests. Dr. Kim's next revelation expanded the scope beyond anything Maya had imagined. Ms. Rodriguez, your site isn't unique. We've identified similar complexes at locations across North America, each containing information that appears to be part of a larger, coordinated knowledge preservation system. The implication was staggering. Maya's discovery wasn't an isolated anomaly, but part of a continent-wide network of sites that suggested organized efforts to preserve advanced knowledge across vast geographical areas. How many sites? Dr. Walsh asked, her scientific curiosity clearly engaged despite her concerns about federal authority. "We've confirmed 17 sites with varying degrees of completeness and accessibility," Dr. Chen replied. "The Montana site, your site, Ms. Rodriguez, appears to contain some of the most complete and sophisticated information we've encountered." Maya struggled to absorb the implications. If federal agencies had been studying similar sites for years, they possessed knowledge about the chambers, contents and significance that far exceeded her understanding based on a single day's exploration. "What kind of information are we talking about?" Maya asked. Dr. Kim consulted her tablet before responding. "The sites contain detailed records of advanced technologies, scientific knowledge, and cultural practices that predate known human development by thousands of years." Dr. Chen's next move eliminated any doubt about the extent of his organization's knowledge. He removed a tablet from his briefcase and began displaying photographs that showed the interior of Maya's chamber with detail and clarity that rivaled her own documentation. These images were captured using specialized remote sensing equipment. Dr. Chen explained as Maya and Dr. Walsh stared at the impossible photographs. "We've been monitoring subsurface anomalies in this region for several years as part of a broader research initiative." Photographs showed not only the painted chamber Maya had discovered, but also adjacent spaces that she hadn't yet explored. The images revealed a complex of interconnected chambers, corridors, and structures that extended far beyond the single room she documented. "There's more down there," Maya whispered, studying the photographs with growing amazement. "Considerably more," Dr. Kim confirmed. "The chamber you discovered is actually part of a larger complex that represents one of the most significant archaeological sites ever found in North America. The full extent includes at least 12 interconnected chambers, each containing different types of information and artifacts." Dr. Walsh leaned forward, her professional excitement overriding her concerns about the federal agent's mysterious authority. "Are you saying there's an entire underground complex beneath Ms. Rodriguez's property?" "We're saying that what Ms. Rodriguez discovered is far more significant than even our preliminary assessments suggested," Dr. Chen replied. "The site represents a complete repository of advanced knowledge that challenges our understanding of prehistoric human capabilities." Maya felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension as the implications sank in. If the federal agents were correct about the site's scope, her discovery was indeed revolutionary. But a complex of 12 chambers would certainly attract attention. That would be impossible to control or contain. "What does this mean for my ranch?" Maya asked, voicing the concern that overrode all other considerations. Dr. Chen's response was carefully measured. "Ms. Rodriguez, sites of this significance typically do require federal protection and oversight. However, our division has authority to negotiate arrangements that respect landowner rights while ensuring appropriate scientific access." "What kind of arrangements?" Dr. Walsh pressed. Agent Reeves consulted his own tablet before responding. "Dr. Walsh, federal protocols for sensitive archaeological sites include options for cooperative agreements that allow private ownership to continue, while facilitating controlled research access. Such agreements often include compensation for landowner cooperation and guaranteed protection of property rights." The offer sounded reasonable. But Maya had learned enough about government operations to know that cooperative agreements could easily become mechanisms for federal control that respected landowner rights only as long as those rights didn't conflict with federal interests. Dr. Kim's next revelation expanded the scope beyond anything Maya had imagined. "Ms. Rodriguez, your site isn't unique. We've identified similar complexes at locations across North America, each containing information that appears to be part of a larger, coordinated knowledge preservation system." The implication was staggering. Maya's discovery wasn't an isolated anomaly, but part of a continent-wide network of sites that suggested organized efforts to preserve advanced knowledge across vast geographical areas. "How many sites?" Dr. Walsh asked, her scientific curiosity clearly engaged despite her concerns about federal authority. "We've confirmed 17 sites with varying degrees of completeness and accessibility," Dr. Chen replied. "The Montana site, your site, Ms. Rodriguez, appears to contain some of the most complete and sophisticated information we've encountered." Maya struggled to absorb the implications. If federal agencies had been studying similar sites for years, they possessed knowledge about the chambers. Contents and significance that far exceeded her understanding based on a single day's exploration. "What kind of information are we talking about?" Maya asked. Dr. Kim consulted her tablet before responding. The sites contained detailed records of advanced technologies, scientific knowledge, and cultural practices that predate known human development by thousands of years. The artistic techniques, astronomical charts, mathematical systems, and engineering concepts represent capabilities that shouldn't exist in prehistoric American cultures. Dr. Walsh leaned back in her chair, clearly struggling with the implications of what she was hearing. Maya accepted gratefully, recognizing that navigating the complex implications of her discovery would require expertise and support that she couldn't provide alone. Whatever choice she made about federal cooperation, she would need allies who understood both the scientific significance of the site and the potential risks of government involvement. Maya spent most of the night walking the ranch boundaries, thinking about her family's history on this land and the choice she faced. Carlos had come to Montana seeking opportunity and security for his descendants. Rosa had built upon that foundation, creating a sustainable operation that provided both livelihood and legacy. Now Maya held the responsibility for decisions that would determine whether the Rodriguez family remained connected to this land or became footnotes in a discovery that overshadowed their personal story. The financial reality remained stark without some form of assistance. She would lose the ranch to foreclosure within 5 weeks. The federal agent's offer of immediate financial support to resolve her debt provided a practical solution to her most pressing problem, but accepting that assistance would mean accepting federal involvement with implications she couldn't fully understand or control. As dawn approached, Maya made her decision. She would cooperate with Dr. Chen's organization, but with conditions designed to protect her interests and maintain some degree of autonomy over her property and her family's legacy. She would also insist that Dr. Walsh remain involved as her independent advisor, ensuring that she had access to expertise that wasn't controlled by federal authorities. The choice felt like a compromise that addressed her immediate needs while preserving options for future decisions. As she learned more about the chamber's contents and the federal organization's true intentions, but as Maya prepared for the federal agent's return, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a situation far more complex and dangerous than anything her agricultural science training had prepared her to handle. The morning sun was rising over the Beartooth Mountains, illuminating the limestone outcropping that concealed secrets that would soon change not just Maya's life, but potentially humanity's understanding of its own history. Whatever lay ahead, Maya Rodriguez was about to become much more than a Montana rancher struggling to save her family's land. She was about to become a guardian of knowledge that might rewrite everything scientists thought they knew about human development and our place in the cosmos. Maya's decision to work with Dr. Chen's mysterious federal division came with carefully negotiated conditions that she hoped would protect her interests while allowing her to remain involved in the discoveries. Implications. The agreement they signed the following morning was unlike any legal document Maya had encountered. Complex, it's heavily classified, and filled with provisions that suggested the federal government's involvement in archaeological discoveries extended far beyond normal preservation protocols. Under the terms of the cooperative agreement, Maya retained ownership of the Estrella Ranch while granting the Federal Research Division exclusive access to the underground complex for scientific study. In exchange, the government would immediately resolve her $186,000 debt to First Mountain Bank, provide ongoing compensation for research access, and guarantee protection of her property rights under federal archaeological preservation laws. More importantly, from Maya's perspective, the agreement included provisions for her continued involvement in the research process. She would serve as the official site liaison, ensuring that federal activities respected both the land and her family's connection to it. Dr. Walsh would be retained as an independent scientific advisor, providing Maya with expertise that wasn't controlled by the federal organization. Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Chen explained as they finalized the paper. Maya accepted gratefully, Recognizing that navigating the complex implications of her discovery would require expertise and support that she couldn't provide alone, whatever choice she made about federal cooperation, she would need allies who understood both the scientific significance of the site and the potential risks of government involvement. Maya spent most of the night walking the ranch boundaries, thinking about her family's history on this land and the choice she faced. Carlos had come to Montana seeking opportunity and security for his descendants. Rosa had built upon that foundation, creating a sustainable operation that provided both livelihood and legacy. Now Maya held the responsibility for decisions that would determine whether the Rodriguez family remained connected to this land or became footnotes in a discovery that overshadowed their personal story. The financial reality remained stark without some form of assistance. She would lose the ranch to foreclosure within 5 weeks. The federal agent's offer of immediate financial support to resolve her debt provided a practical solution to her most pressing problem, but accepting that assistance would mean accepting federal involvement with implications she couldn't fully understand or control. As dawn approached, Maya made her decision. She would cooperate with Dr. Chen's organization, but with conditions designed to protect her interests and maintain some degree of autonomy over her property and her family's legacy. She would also insist that Dr. Walsh remain involved as her independent advisor, ensuring that she had access to expertise that wasn't controlled by federal authorities. The choice felt like a compromise that addressed her immediate needs while preserving options for future decisions. As she learned more about the chamber's contents and the federal organization's true intentions, but as Maya prepared for the federal agent's return, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a situation far more complex and dangerous than anything her agricultural science training had prepared her to handle. The morning sun was rising over the Beartooth Mountains, illuminating the limestone outcropping that concealed secrets that would soon change not just Maya's life, but potentially humanity's understanding of its own history. Whatever lay ahead, Maya Rodriguez was about to become much more than a Montana rancher struggling to save her family's land. She was about to become a guardian of knowledge that might rewrite everything scientists thought they knew about human development and our place in the cosmos. Maya's decision to work with Dr. Chen's mysterious federal division came with carefully negotiated conditions that she hoped would protect her interests while allowing her to remain involved in the discovery's implications. The agreement they signed the following morning was unlike any legal document Maya had encountered. Complex, it's heavily classified, and filled with provisions that suggested the federal government's involvement in archaeological discoveries extended far beyond normal preservation protocols. Under the terms of the cooperative agreement, Maya retained ownership of the Estrella Ranch while granting the Federal Research Division exclusive access to the underground complex for scientific study. In exchange, the government would immediately resolve her $186,000 debt to First Mountain Bank, provide ongoing compensation for research access, and guarantee protection of her property rights under federal archaeological preservation laws. More importantly, from Maya's perspective, the agreement included provisions for her continued involvement in the research process. She would serve as the official site liaison, ensuring that federal activities respected both the land and her family's connection to it. Dr. Walsh would be retained as an independent scientific advisor, providing Maya with expertise that wasn't controlled by the federal organization. Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Chen explained as they finalized the paperwork. This agreement reflects our commitment to partnership rather than seizure. Your cooperation allows us to conduct necessary research while ensuring that you benefit from rather than suffer because of your discovery. Maya signed the documents with mixed feelings. The immediate financial relief was undeniable. Within hours of signing, First Mountain Bank confirmed that her debt had been satisfied in full, removing the foreclosure threat that had dominated her thoughts for months. But the agreement also committed her to a relationship with federal authorities whose true nature and intentions remained unclear. Agent Reeves supervised the installation of security equipment around the chamber entrance, including motion sensors, cameras, and communication systems that would monitor access while allowing Maya to maintain her normal ranch operations. The security measures were sophisticated but discreet, designed to protect the site without creating obvious evidence of federal activity that might attract unwanted attention. Dr. Kim began establishing a research station in one of Maya's outbuildings. Bringing in equipment that suggested the federal division's capabilities extended far beyond normal archaeological tools. Maya observed computer systems, analytical instruments, and communication devices that appeared more suited to intelligence operations than academic research. 3 days after signing the cooperative agreement, Maya joined Dr. Chin's team for her first exploration of the larger underground complex that there. Are you suggesting that these sites preserve evidence of contact between humans and some other intelligent species? Maya asked. Voicing the question that had been growing in her mind since her first exploration of the chamber, Dr. Chen's response was carefully measured. Ms. Rodriguez, the evidence in these sites suggests knowledge transfer from sources that don't fit conventional models of human cultural development. The specific nature of those sources remains a subject of ongoing research and analysis. Maya noticed that Dr. Chen consistently avoided direct statements about non-human intelligence, instead using language that acknowledged the evidence while leaving interpretation open. But the implications of what she was seeing seemed increasingly clear. The knowledge preserved in these chambers was far too advanced to have developed independently within prehistoric human cultures. One section of the repository that particularly captured Maya's attention showed detailed star charts that tracked celestial movements with mathematical precision spanning thousands of years. The charts included not just observable astronomical events, but predictions of future celestial configurations that suggested understanding of complex gravitational interactions and orbital mechanics. These astronomical calculations are accurate to within margins that modern computers would consider acceptable, Dr. Kim noted, measuring the precise angles and proportions used in the star charts. The mathematical knowledge required to create such charts wouldn't be developed by human cultures for thousands of years after these sites were supposedly created. Dr. Walsh, who had remained largely silent during the exploration, finally voiced the question that Maya knew they were all considering. If these sites preserve evidence of advanced knowledge transfer, why aren't there similar discoveries documented in the archaeological record? Why have sites like this remained hidden until now? Agent Reeves answered with information that suggested the Federal Division's knowledge extended far beyond what they'd initially revealed. Dr. Walsh, similar sites have been discovered and documented, but most discoveries have been managed through federal protocols that limit public disclosure until the implications can be properly understood and assessed. The most shocking discovery came as Maya explored a section of the repository that Dr. Kim described as genealogical records, wall paintings that appear to document specific family lineages and their connections to the knowledge preservation system. The artwork showed human families across multiple generations, with certain individuals marked by symbols that suggested special roles or responsibilities. Maya was studying these genealogical sections when Dr. Kim made an observation that changed everything about her understanding of her family's connection to the land. Ms. Rodriguez, could you examine this section more closely? Some of these family markers bear resemblance to symbols we've documented in southwestern regions associated with Spanish colonial settlement patterns. As Maya studied the wall section Dr. Kim indicated, she began to recognize symbolic elements that seemed strangely familiar. The markers used to identify certain family lines included geometric patterns and design elements that reminded her of decorative motifs she'd seen in her grandmother's possessions jewelry, pottery, and textile patterns that Rosa had described as family traditions from Spain. Dr. Chen consulted a tablet computer, loaded with genealogical research before making a statement that stunned Maya. Ms. Rodriguez, our research indicates that your family's connection to this region may extend much further back than your great-grandfather's arrival in 1943. What do you mean? Maya asked, though part of her had begun to suspect that her family's story was more complex than she'd been told. Dr. Kim removed a folder from her equipment case and spread out documents that appeared to be genealogical charts, historical records, and photocopies of ancient documents written in Spanish. According to our research, Rodriguez family name appears in Spanish colonial records from New Mexico dating back to the 1600s, associated with individuals who served as guardians or caretakers for sites containing sacred knowledge. Maya stared at the documents, trying to process the implications. If Dr. Kim's research was accurate, her family's connection to knowledge preservation sites extended back over 3 centuries. Long before Carlos Rodriguez's immigration to Montana, are you saying that my great-grandfather didn't randomly choose to settle in this area? Maya asked. Agent Reeves consulted his own files before responding. Ms. Rodriguez, our analysis suggests that Carlos Rodriguez was specifically directed to this location by family knowledge that had been preserved across generations. His settlement here wasn't coincidental. It was part of a deliberate effort to maintain family guardianship over this site. The revelation recontextualized everything Maya understood about her family's history. Carlos hadn't been a random immigrant. Seeking opportunity in Montana had been fulfilling a family obligation that stretched back centuries. Rosa's insistence on keeping the ranch in family hands hadn't been simple. Stubbornness had been recognition of responsibilities that Maya was only now beginning to understand. Dr. Chen's next revelation provided even more startling context about Maya's family heritage. The federal division had been tracking families associated with knowledge preservation sites for decades, maintaining genealogical records and monitoring descendants of individuals who had served as guardians or caretakers for the ancient complexes. The Rodriguez family appears in our records as one of several bloodlines specifically associated with the North American Site Network, Dr. Chen explained, showing Maya charts that tracked family movements across multiple generations. Your ancestors weren't just random settlers. They were members of a deliberate preservation network that maintained knowledge about these sites across centuries. Maya studied the genealogical charts with growing amazement. The document showed Rodriguez family members in various locations across the American Southwest and northern Mexico, always associated with areas where knowledge preservation sites had been identified or suspected. The family had apparently maintained its guardianship responsibilities even as political boundaries changed and social circumstances evolved. Dr. Chen, if my family has been connected to these sites for centuries, why wasn't I told about this? Responsibility? Maya asked. Dr. Kim responded with information that suggested the complexity of maintaining hidden knowledge across generations. Family knowledge about the sites was often passed down through carefully controlled traditions that balanced preservation with protection. Not every generation received complete information. Knowledge was shared only when circumstances required it, and only with individuals who demonstrated the capacity to handle such responsibility. Maya thought about her grandmother, Rosa's final journals, and her repeated references to the ranch's special qualities. Had Rosa known about the chamber, but chosen not to reveal that knowledge to Maya directly? Had she been waiting for Maya to discover the site independently as a test of her readiness to assume guardianship responsibilities? Agent Reeves provided additional context that suggested Maya's discovery hadn't been as accidental as she'd believed. Ms. Rodriguez, the storm that revealed the chamber entrance occurred during astronomical conditions that are significant according to the knowledge preserved in these sites. The timing suggests that your discovery was anticipated by whoever designed the preservation system. The possibility that her discovery had been deliberately timed according to astronomical cycles, maintained by ancient knowledge, pushed Maya's understanding of the situation into territory that felt almost supernatural. If the chamber had been designed to reveal itself at specific moments, determined by celestial mechanics, then her role as discoverer had been predetermined by planning that extended back thousands of years. As Maya's exploration of the repository continued, Acton revealed the full scope of the federal divisions knowledge about the site network and its implications for understanding human development. The 17 sites they had identified across North America represented only the confirmed locations. Additional sites were suspected but not yet accessed. Each site contains different aspects of the preserved knowledge, Dr. Chen explained, showing Maya maps that marked confirmed and suspected locations across the continent. Your site contains what appears to be foundational information, the origin stories, the basic principles, the fundamental knowledge that supports more advanced concepts preserved in other locations. The sites formed a pattern across North America that suggested deliberate geographical distribution designed to ensure preservation even if individual locations were damaged or lost. Sites in the Pacific Northwest contained advanced engineering and construction techniques. Locations in the Ohio Valley preserved sophisticated agricultural and ecological knowledge. Sites along the Gulf Coast maintained medical and biological information that rivaled modern scientific understanding. The network appears to represent a comprehensive preservation system designed to maintain human knowledge through periods of cultural disruption or technological regression, Dr. Kim added, consulting charts that showed the relationships between different sites and their specialized knowledge preservation. Maya struggled to absorb the implications of what she was learning. If the Federal Division's analysis was correct, the sites represented preparation for maintaining human civilization through catastrophic events that could destroy normal knowledge transmission systems. The ancient builders had anticipated scenarios where conventional education, written records, and cultural institutions might be lost, and had created backup systems to preserve essential knowledge for future recovery. Are you suggesting that? These sites were built to preserve knowledge through some kind of anticipated catastrophe, Maya asked. Dr. Chun's response was measured but troubling. The evidence suggests that the site builders had knowledge of cyclical challenges that periodically threaten human civilization climate variations, geological events, or social collapses that could destroy accumulated knowledge and force cultures to restart development from primitive levels. The implications were staggering. If the sites had been designed to preserve knowledge through catastrophic events, then their activation or revelation might be timed to coincide with approaching challenges that required access to advanced knowledge. For human survival, as Maya's understanding of the site network and her family's role deepened, she began to grasp the weight of responsibility that came with her discovery. She wasn't just the owner of an important archaeological site. She was apparently the latest in a lineage of guardians, responsible for maintaining knowledge that might be essential for human civilization's continuity. Dr. Walsh, who had been documenting the exploration with professional thoroughness, raised questions about the contemporary implications of the preserved knowledge. If these sites contain advanced technologies and scientific understanding, why haven't they been utilized to address current human challenges like climate change, disease, or resource scarcity? Agent Reeves provided an answer that suggested the Federal Division had been grappling with similar questions for decades. Dr. Walsh, the knowledge preserved in these sites is often too advanced for immediate implementation, using current technology and social structures. Attempting to introduce such capabilities without proper preparation could create more problems than solutions. Maya understood the logic, but found it frustrating. The sites contained knowledge that could improve human life, limiting access to that information seemed to prioritize control over benefit. But she also recognized that releasing advanced technologies into a world unprepared for their implications could indeed create dangerous instabilities. Dr. Kim has provided additional context about the Federal Division's approach to managing the sites and their contents. Our role is to ensure that preserved knowledge is protected and studied, but also to assess when and how such information might be safely integrated into contemporary human development. Premature release could be as dangerous as permanent concealment. The conversation revealed the complexity of Maya's situation. As a guardian, she held responsibility not just for protecting the site, but for making decisions about how its knowledge might be utilized. The Federal Cooperation Agreement gave her some authority over access and research, but the ultimate decisions about revealing or implementing preserved technologies would involve considerations far beyond her expertise or authority. As the day's exploration concluded and the team prepared to return to the surface, Maya found herself overwhelmed by the scope of what she'd learned. In less than a week, she'd gone from struggling to save her family's ranch to discovering that she was part of a multi-generational network responsible for preserving knowledge that might be essential for human survival. The financial security provided by the Federal Cooperation Agreement had resolved her immediate concerns about foreclosure and debt. But those problems now seemed trivial compared to the responsibilities she'd inherited. Maya was no longer simply a Montana rancher. She was a guardian of knowledge that could reshape human understanding of development, capability, and cosmic relationships. Dr. Chen's final briefing before the team departed for the day provided additional information about Maya's role and the support she could expect from the federal division. Ms. Rodriguez, your family's guardianship responsibilities include not just protecting the site, but also learning its contents and understanding when circumstances might require broader access to preserved knowledge. Maya realized that her real education was just beginning. Understanding the site's contents would require years of study, and making decisions about how that knowledge might be utilized would demand wisdom that she wasn't sure she possessed. But the genealogical evidence suggested that previous generations of her family had successfully maintained their guardianship responsibilities across centuries of social and political change. As she walked back toward the ranch house, Maya reflected on the transformation her life had undergone in such a short time. The Estrella Ranch remained her home and responsibility, but it was also the location of one of humanity's most important knowledge repositories. The isolation that had made modern ranching so challenging now provided essential protection for secrets that could change the world. That evening, as Maya sat on her porch watching stars emerge in the clear Montana sky, she thought about the astronomical charts preserved in the repository and their predictions of celestial events, spanning thousands of years into the future. Somewhere among those calculations might be information about when the preserved knowledge would be needed, when human civilization might face challenges that required access to capabilities preserved by ancient planning. For now, Maya's role was to learn, protect, and prepare for responsibilities she was only beginning to understand. But as she considered the weight of her family's legacy and the trust placed in her by generations of ancestors, Maya Rodriguez knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what her family had prepared her to do for over 3 centuries, the discovery that had initially seemed like a solution to her financial problems had revealed itself as something far more significant, calling that connected her to knowledge, responsibility, and purpose that extended far beyond her individual concerns or immediate needs. Maya was no longer just fighting to save her ranch. She was helping to preserve humanity's future. 3 weeks after Maya's initial discovery, Estrella Ranch had been transformed into a hub of controlled but intense activity. Federal research teams had established a sophisticated base of operations in the eastern meadow, complete with laboratory facilities, communication systems, and security measures that rivaled military installations. Yet from the outside, the ranch appeared remarkably unchanged, testament to Dr. Chen's organization's expertise in conducting sensitive operations without attracting unwanted attention. Maya had spent those weeks immersing herself in the repository's contents, working with Dr. Kim and other specialists to understand the scope and implications of the knowledge preserved beneath her land. Each day brought new revelations that challenged her understanding not just of human history, but of humanity's place in a cosmos far more complex and interconnected than she had ever imagined. The most significant discovery had come just 5 days earlier, when Maya's exploration of the repository's deepest chambers revealed what Dr. Chen termed the activation protocols detailed instructions for utilizing the preserved knowledge in ways that could fundamentally alter human development and capabilities. But these protocols came with warnings and requirements that suggested their implementation would represent an irreversible transformation for human civilization. Maya, Dr. Walsh said, as they concluded another day of documentation and analysis. I need you to understand that what we're dealing with here goes far beyond archaeology or even historical revision. The activation protocols suggest that this site was designed as more than a knowledge repository. It was built as a transformation catalyst. Maya had been reaching similar conclusions based on her own study of the chamber contents, the preserved knowledge wasn't just information to be learned, it was a complete system for advancing human consciousness, technological capability, and cosmic understanding to levels that would represent a qualitative leap in human development. But the protocols also made clear that such transformation couldn't be implemented partially or gradually. The knowledge systems were integrated in ways that required complete activation to function safely. Attempting to use fragments of the preserved knowledge without understanding its interconnected nature could create catastrophic instabilities that might destroy rather than advance human civilization. Dr. Chin's announcement on October 28th changed everything about the timeline and urgency of Maya's situation. His organization's astronomical calculations, combined with information from the activation protocols, had identified a celestial configuration occurring in just 4 days that represented the optimal moment for implementing the site's transformational capabilities. Maya, the astronomical alignment on November 1st creates conditions that won't recur for another 26,000 years. Dr. Chen explained, displaying charts that showed planetary positions, stellar orientations, and gravitational relationships with mathematical precision that rivaled the ancient calculations preserved in the repository. According to the activation protocols, this alignment provides the energetic framework necessary for safely implementing the transformation systems. The timing wasn't coincidental. The site builders had calculated this alignment millennia in advance, designing their preservation system to become fully operational at precisely the moment when astronomical conditions would support the safe implementation of advanced knowledge without destabilizing human consciousness or social structures. Maya studied the astronomical charts with growing comprehension. The alignment involved not just planets within Earth's solar system, but also the positioning of nearby stellar systems and galactic structures that suggested knowledge of cosmic relationships extending far beyond anything human science had documented. Are you saying that the site was designed to activate on this specific date? Maya asked. Dr. Kim consulted the translation work she'd been conducting on the repository's written materials. According to our analysis of the activation protocols, the site builders calculated optimal implementation windows based on cosmic cycles that repeat every 26,000 years. The upcoming alignment represents the first such window since the sites were created. The implications were staggering. Maya's discovery hadn't been accidentally timed, it had been precisely coordinated to occur during the weeks leading up to an astronomical event that the ancient builders had identified as essential for safely implementing their preservation systems. Agent Reeves provided additional context that made the timing even more significant. Maya, similar activations are being prepared at other sites across the network. The alignment affects all 17 locations simultaneously, creating the possibility for a coordinated implementation of the complete knowledge preservation system. Maya realized that her choice about activation wouldn't just affect her site, it would be part of a network-wide decision that could transform human civilization across the entire continent. The responsibility was overwhelming, but it also meant that she wouldn't be making the decision alone. On October 30th, just 2 days before the alignment, Maya was introduced to the other guardians whose families had maintained similar responsibilities at sites across North America. The federal organization had arranged 4 representatives from each active site to gather at the Estrella Ranch for what Dr. Chen described as the final consultation before implementation decisions. The guardians were a diverse group, reflecting the varied cultural and geographical backgrounds of families who had maintained their responsibilities across generations. Sarah Whitehorse represented a site in the Pacific Northwest that had been guarded by her Salish ancestors for over 1,000 years. Dr. Marcus Thompson, an African-American professor of astronomy, carried responsibilities inherited from a site in the Ohio Valley that his family had protected since their ancestors' arrival via the Underground Railroad. Alina Vasqueza Santos, a marine biologist from Texas, maintained guardianship over Gulf Coast sites that her family had protected since Spanish colonial times. James Running Bear, a Lakota engineer, represented sites in the northern plains that had been preserved through his tribe's sacred traditions. Dr. Amira Hassan, an Egyptian-American physicist, had inherited responsibilities for sites in the Great Basin that connected to ancient migrations from the Mediterranean. Each guardian brought knowledge and perspectives shaped by their family's unique preservation traditions. But all shared the common experience of discovering that their life circumstances had been guided by responsibilities, extending back generations. Like Maya, most had learned about their guardianship roles only recently, as the approaching alignment triggered revelation protocols that their ancestors had established. We've all been living lives we thought were our own choices, Sarah Whitehorse observed as the Guardians shared their stories during their first evening together. But looking back, I can see how every major decision was influenced by family guidance that prepared me for this moment. Dr. Thompson nodded in agreement. My grandmother always insisted that I study astronomy, but she never explained why it was so important. Now I understand that she was preparing me to interpret the activation protocols when the time came. Maya felt a deep connection to these individuals who had inherited similar responsibilities and faced similar choices. Their family stories were different, but the underlying pattern was remarkably consistent: generations of careful preparation for a moment that would require decisions affecting all humanity. As the Guardians explored Maya's site together, they made a discovery that profoundly affected their understanding of the choice they faced. Hidden within the deepest chamber of the repository was a section that Dr. Kim termed the Consequence Archives, detailed records of what had occurred during previous activation cycles on other worlds. The archives revealed that the knowledge preservation system wasn't unique to Earth. The beings who had created it had apparently implemented similar systems on multiple worlds as they encountered developing intelligent species. The records documented both successes and failures, providing sobering context about the risks and benefits of activation. According to these records, Dr. Kim explained as the Guardians studied the Consequence Archives, activation leads to rapid advancement in consciousness, technology, and cosmic understanding. Species that successfully integrate the knowledge develop capabilities that allow them to transcend planetary limitations and join a larger galactic community. But the archives also documented failures where activation had been implemented prematurely or incorrectly. Species that weren't sufficiently prepared for the transformation had experienced social collapse, technological disasters, or consciousness fragmentation that effectively ended their development as viable civilizations. The success rate appears to be approximately 60%, Dr. Chen added, consulting his analysis of the archive contents. Species that meet certain developmental criteria before activation have much higher success rates, while those that attempt activation before reaching appropriate maturity almost always experience catastrophic outcomes. Maya and the other Guardians spent hours studying the success and failure criteria documented in the archives. The successful species had achieved technological capability, social cooperation, and consciousness development that allowed them to integrate advanced knowledge without losing their essential identity or destroying their social structures. The failed species had typically attempted activation during periods of conflict, environmental crisis, or social fragmentation that made them unable to handle the rapid changes that implementation would bring. For these species, activation had accelerated existing problems rather than providing solutions. The question we have to answer, Alina Vascasanto said quietly, is whether humanity meets the criteria for successful activation, or whether we're more likely to experience catastrophic failure. The Guardians spent their second day together conducting what amounted to a comprehensive assessment of humanity's readiness for the transformation that activation would bring. Using criteria derived from the Consequence Archives, they evaluated current human capabilities, social structures, and developmental characteristics that would determine the likelihood of successful integration. On the positive side, humanity had achieved technological capabilities that met or exceeded the minimum requirements documented in the archives. Modern communications, transportation, scientific understanding, and global coordination systems provided the infrastructure necessary to support rapid knowledge integration without complete social disruption. Human consciousness development also showed promising indicators. The growing recognition of global interconnectedness, environmental awareness, and cross-cultural cooperation suggested that humanity was developing the perspective necessary to handle knowledge that transcended planetary limitations. But the assessment also revealed concerning indicators that suggested humanity might not be fully prepared for activation. Global conflicts, environmental degradation, social inequality, and the persistence of tribal thinking patterns were characteristic of species that had failed to successfully integrate the preserved knowledge. We're at a threshold moment, Dr. Thompson observed after reviewing the assessment criteria. Humanity has developed enough capability to potentially succeed with activation. But we still maintain destructive patterns that could lead to catastrophic failure. James Running Bear provided a perspective shaped by his indigenous cultural background. My elders always taught that major changes should only be undertaken when the community is ready and unified. Attempting transformation during times of division usually makes existing problems worse rather than solving them. Dr. Hassan approached the question from a scientific perspective. The activation protocols suggest that implementation creates an irreversible transformation. Once initiated, the process cannot be stopped or reversed. We're essentially betting humanity's future on our assessment of current readiness. Maya found herself at the center of a decision that felt impossibly complex. The consequence archives provided guidance, but ultimately required subjective judgment about humanity's character and potential that no amount of analysis could definitively resolve. On October 31st, just hours before the alignment would create the activation window, Dr. Chen provided the Guardians with their final briefing about the implementation process and its implications. The federal organization had completed their analysis of all 17 sites, confirming that the network was ready for coordinated activation if the Guardians chose to proceed. The activation process requires unanimous consent from all active Guardians, Dr. Chen explained. The knowledge preservation system was designed to prevent partial implementation that could create dangerous instabilities. Either all sites activate simultaneously or none activate at all. The unanimity requirement meant that Maya's decision would affect not just her site, but the entire network. If any Guardian chose not to activate, the opportunity would be lost for another 26,000 years. If all Guardians agreed to activation, humanity would experience a transformation that would fundamentally alter its development trajectory. Dr. Kim provided technical details about what activation would involve. The process begins with energy. Alignment between all sites during the astronomical window. This creates a resonance field that affects human consciousness on a global scale, making minds more receptive to advanced knowledge integration. The consciousness preparation phase would last approximately 6 hours, during which humans worldwide would experience enhanced awareness, expanded perception, and increased capacity for complex understanding. This preparation was essential to prevent consciousness fragmentation when advanced knowledge was introduced. Following consciousness preparation, the knowledge integration phase introduces preserved information directly into human awareness through quantum field effects that we don't fully understand but can observe and measure, Agent Reeves added. This phase distributes essential knowledge to every human mind capable of receiving it. The final phase involved what the protocols termed capability activation, the awakening of dormant genetic potentials and consciousness abilities that would allow humans to effectively utilize the integrated knowledge. This phase was irreversible and would permanently alter human developmental trajectory. The entire process takes approximately 18 hours from initiation to completion, Dr. Chen concluded. By the end of the activation cycle, humanity will have access to knowledge and capabilities that will fundamentally change our relationship to technology, consciousness, and the cosmos. As the activation window approached, each Guardian was given private time to make their final decision about implementation. Maya spent her consultation period walking the boundaries of the Estrella Ranch, thinking about her family's legacy and the choice that would determine humanity's future, the financial considerations that had dominated her thoughts. Just weeks earlier now seemed trivial compared to the responsibility she faced. The federal cooperation agreement had secured her ranch and provided financial stability, but those benefits would be meaningless if activation led to civilizational collapse. Maya thought about her great-grandfather Carlos, who had fled instability in Mexico to build something lasting in Montana. Would he have supported a decision that could transform human civilization, or would he have counseled caution and preservation of existing stability? She considered her grandmother Rosa would maintain the ranch through decades of challenges while apparently knowing about the hidden chamber beneath the limestone outcropping. Rosa's final journals had spoken of special qualities in preparation for discovery suggesting that she had anticipated this moment and trusted Maya to make appropriate decisions. Dr. Walsh joined Maya for part of her consultation period, providing the perspective of someone who had experienced the discovery process but didn't carry the weight of guardianship responsibility. Maya, I've spent my career studying human development and cultural change, Dr. Walsh said as they stood near the chamber entrance. What the activation protocols describe would represent the most significant transformation in human history, more fundamental than the development of agriculture, writing, or technology. Maya appreciated Dr. Walsh's perspective, but she also recognized that the archaeologist's academic training provided limited guidance for decisions involving cosmic-scale transformation and risks. The consequence archives suggest that successful activation leads to capabilities we can barely imagine, Maya replied. But they also show that failure can destroy everything we've built as a species. As the consultation period concluded, Maya realized that her decision ultimately had to be based on her assessment of humanity's character and potential rather than on detailed analysis of risks and benefits. The choice required faith in human resilience, wisdom, and capacity for positive transformation. At 11:47 p.m. Mountain Time on October 31st, the astronomical alignment reached the precise configuration required for activation. Maya joined the other Guardians in the repository's central chamber, where communication equipment allowed them to coordinate their decisions with Guardians at sites across the continent. The chamber itself had begun to exhibit new characteristics. As the alignment approached, the luminescent pigments had grown brighter, creating patterns of light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with some cosmic heartbeat. The air itself felt charged with energy that made Maya's skin tingle and her consciousness feel expanded beyond normal boundaries. Guardians, we have reached the activation window, Dr. Chen announced through the communication system. Site reports optimal energy alignment and readiness for implementation. The decision now rests with you. Maya listened as each Guardian reported their decision. Sarah Whitehorse chose activation. Believing that her ancestors had preserved the knowledge specifically for this moment, Dr. Thompson agreed. Convinced that humanity's scientific development indicated readiness for cosmic-scale knowledge, Alina Vasquez-Santos supported activation based on her assessment that environmental challenges required advanced capabilities for human survival. James Running Bear chose activation after consulting with tribal elders who confirmed that their traditions had always anticipated this transformation. Dr. Hassan agreed to implementation based on her analysis that humanity's technological development had reached a point where stagnation posed greater risks than advancement. One by one, the Guardians chose activation until only Maya remained. The unanimity requirement meant that her decision would determine whether the activation proceeded or was postponed for another 20. Maya found herself at the center of a decision that felt impossibly complex. The consequence archives provided guidance, but ultimately required subjective judgment about humanity's character and potential that no amount of analysis could definitively resolve. On October 31st, just hours before the alignment would create the activation window, Dr. Chen provided the Guardians with their final briefing about the implementation process and its implications. The federal organization had completed their analysis of all 17 sites, confirming that the network was ready for coordinated activation if the Guardians chose to proceed. The activation process requires unanimous consent from all active Guardians, Dr. Chen explained. The knowledge preservation system was designed to prevent partial implementation that could create dangerous instabilities. Either all sites activate simultaneously or none activate at all. The unanimity requirement meant that Maya's decision would affect not just her site, but the entire network. If any Guardian chose not to activate, the opportunity would be lost for another 26,000 years. If all Guardians agreed to activation, humanity would experience a transformation that would fundamentally alter its development trajectory. Dr. Kim provided technical details about what activation would involve. The process begins with energy. Alignment between all sites during the astronomical window. This creates a resonance field that affects human consciousness on a global scale, making minds more receptive to advanced knowledge integration. The consciousness preparation phase would last approximately 6 hours. during which humans worldwide would experience enhanced awareness, expanded perception, and increased capacity for complex understanding. This preparation was essential to prevent consciousness fragmentation when advanced knowledge was introduced. Following consciousness preparation, the knowledge integration phase introduces preserved information directly into human awareness through quantum field effects that we don't fully understand but can observe and measure. Agent Reeves added, "This phase distributes essential knowledge to every human mind capable of receiving it." The final phase involved what the protocols termed capability activation. Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication system with barely contained excitement.
Ow.
All sites report successful energy synchronization. Consciousness preparation phase is beginning across all human populations. Global monitoring stations are detecting the predicted quantum field effects. Maya felt her own consciousness expanding as the preparation phase affected her directly. Her perception of the chamber, of the other people present, and of reality itself began to shift in ways that felt natural, despite being utterly unprecedented. She could sense the thoughts and emotions of the other guardians, feel the resonance connections extending to sites across the continent, and perceive layers of cosmic structure that had been invisible to normal human awareness. The knowledge integration phase began 6 hours later, as predicted by the activation protocols. Maya experienced the sensation of information flowing directly into her mind, not as words or images, but as complete understanding that seemed to integrate with her existing knowledge and experience. She suddenly comprehended scientific principles that human research hadn't yet discovered, technological possibilities that exceeded current capabilities, and consciousness development techniques that could enhance human potential in ways she was only beginning to explore. Throughout the 18-hour activation cycle, Maya maintained awareness of the global process occurring simultaneously. Through the network's quantum connections, she could perceive the preparation and integration phases affecting human consciousness worldwide. Most people experience the changes as enhanced awareness, expanded empathy, and increased capacity for complex understanding. Positive developments that suggested humanity was successfully integrating the preserved knowledge. When the activation cycle completed, Maya found herself in a world that was both familiar and fundamentally transformed. The Estrella Ranch looked the same, but her perception of it now included awareness of energy patterns, ecological relationships, and cosmic connections that had been invisible before activation. Human consciousness had been permanently enhanced, giving everyone access to expanded awareness and capabilities that would gradually manifest as people learned to utilize their new potential. The integrated knowledge provided solutions to environmental challenges, technological advancement pathways, and social cooperation methods that could address humanity's major problems if implemented wisely. But perhaps most significantly, activation had established permanent connection with the cosmic community that had originally provided the knowledge preservation system. Humanity was no longer isolated on Earth. Contact with advanced civilizations throughout the galaxy was now possible and would gradually develop as humans learn to utilize their enhanced capabilities. Maya stood in the chamber that had begun. This transformation, now fully understanding her role as a guardian and her family's preparation for this moment, the Estrella Ranch would continue to serve as a nexus point for humanity's development. But Maya's responsibilities had expanded to include helping coordinate humanity's integration into a larger cosmic community. Dr. Walsh, whose consciousness had also been enhanced by the activation process, joined Maya in the chamber. "How do you feel about your decision?" she asked. Maya considered the question carefully. Around them, the chamber's artwork now seemed alive with meaning and connection to knowledge systems that extended across the galaxy. Humanity had chosen transformation over stagnation, potential over security, and cosmic citizenship over planetary isolation. "I feel like we've become who we were always meant to be," Maya replied. The knowledge was preserved for this moment because the beings who created the system knew that eventually, every developing species faces this choice: whether to remain limited by their current understanding or to accept the transformation necessary for cosmic citizenship. Maya Rodriguez stood on the ridge overlooking the Estrella Ranch, watching the sunset paint the Beartooth Mountains with colors that her enhanced perception revealed to contain patterns and energies invisible to pre-activation human vision. 6. Months after the global transformation, humanity was still adapting to its expanded capabilities and cosmic connections, but the progress was remarkable. Environmental restoration projects utilizing integrated knowledge had reversed decades of ecological damage within months. Social cooperation had improved dramatically as enhanced empathy and expanded awareness made conflict resolution more effective. Technological developments were advancing at unprecedented rates as humans learned to implement knowledge that had been preserved for thousands of years. The ranch continued to operate as a working cattle operation, but it also served as a coordination center for humanity's ongoing development and cosmic integration. Representatives from advanced civilizations had begun visiting Earth, establishing formal contact and providing guidance for humanity's transition to galactic citizenship. Maya's role had evolved from rancher to guardian to cosmic liaison, but she remained grounded in the land that her family had protected for generations. The financial problems that had once threatened the ranch's survival now seemed like distant memories from a more limited time. As the first stars appeared in the Montana sky, Maya reflected on the choice that had changed everything. The risks had been real, but humanity had proven capable of handling the transformation with wisdom and resilience. The knowledge that had been preserved beneath the limestone outcropping was now part of human consciousness, available to guide the species toward a future that extended far beyond the boundaries of Earth. Maya Rodriguez had saved her family's ranch, but more importantly, she had helped save humanity's future. The woman who had once struggled to repair fence lines now helped coordinate humanity's integration into a cosmic community that spanned the galaxy. And in the enhanced awareness that activation had provided, Maya knew that this transformation was not an ending, but the beginning of an adventure that would carry humanity to heights of development and understanding that previous generations could never have imagined. The Estrella Ranch remained a working operation under Montana's big sky, but it was now also humanity's gateway to the stars. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.